Hello, welcome to the Awakening Report. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. As always, just love going through the Bible. So many fun topics. The last couple of weeks have been, let's call them challenging, interesting, provocative to some extent. I wanted to switch gears a little bit because sometimes we can get into these topics where we start nipping at each other and going back and forth about the different topics. I won't get into those other topics, but go look at those shows if you want. They were a lot of fun. Tonight we have a special guest on that I'm really excited about. He has done a lot to inspire me with his digital art. He's actually taken the things that God has created, which is what every good artist does, right? And renders them in his own unique way. And so I'm delighted to introduce to you Ted Larson. Hey, Ted, how are you doing?
Great, Doug. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I ran across your art, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago. I went ahead and purchased your CD because I thought it was so cool. But you've got this very unique way of sharing the biblical stories with us. And I thought that was just so cool. And one of my favorites is where you have God sitting on the throne. It's obviously taken from the book of Ezekiel. At least I think that's the inspiration for it. It's from the book of Ezekiel. And, for me, I thought it was so cool because, it really helps me to imagine what God might look like, right? And just that whole idea of who he is. And I think sometimes in the field of Bible where we're dealing with text all the time, we're dealing with theology, we're dealing with theories, but it's all about words, right? And for somebody like you to come along and to then share with us just what that might look graphically, I think is so important. And so I really appreciate what you do. I think that all of us are really indebted to your imagination and to the way you do that. So thank you. And
Thank you.
yeah, tell us really quickly, where can people find your artwork?
Well, currently my website is located at digitalartbytedlarson.net. And they can look at the store products, they can look at gallery examples, and there's a contact form if they have questions about buying just individual pictures for book covers and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share with people just a little bit of what you've done. So kind of tell us about what is this photo, or this, not photo, but this picture. What is this all about? Obviously, it's the burning bush, but how did you come about this idea?
Well, when I read the Bible, I have a daily devotional. It's the first thing I do when I get up. I make some coffee, do my daily study, and I'll sketch. If something strikes me visually, my imagination's engaged. And if it's something that's really vivid and kind of sticks with me for a day or two, I'll feel inspired to turn it into a digital painting. And this, of course, is Moses, his encounter with God speaking through the burning bush from the book of Exodus. And this particular picture, I'm going to walk you through the stages of its development, and might be helpful for your viewers to understand how I work, and hopefully interesting at the same time.
Awesome. All right. So here's the next slide.
I work primarily in Photoshop as my way of putting all the various elements together. I work in layers, and in this diagram, you kind of see the exploded process of the different elements. That at the beginning of the bottom layer, I typically work in 3D first. It's a way of kind of blocking out the physicality of a picture. And then I'll photograph different elements like the effects of, in this case, the fire. I photographed a fire burning for about a half hour and assembled bits and pieces of flame into a trapezoid shape that fit nicely over my bush. And then I photographed my brother in a costume. He's been my go-to model for years. Unfortunately, he's gone to be with the Lord, so I've had to hire professional models for more recent pictures. But anyhow, he was a great patient help for me for a lot of my art. And so in this case, this is a silhouette of him. You can go on. This is what I call my previs storyboard. The film industry, they use, especially like the big blockbuster popcorn movies, they will sometimes use what's called 3D modeling to block out the shapes, the motion, the action of a particular elements they want to convey in a sequence. And for me, I can only get so far sometimes when I sketch. And working in 3D is a way to kind of crystallize and clarify my imagination. So here's a 3D rough view of Moses before the bush.
That's awesome. Am I at the right, tell me if I'm at the right slide here.
Yeah, this is the next one. Okay, here I start experimenting with light, texture, and color to create the physical scene. There's no what are called texture maps yet. I'll add like sand, gravel, wood shortly, but I'm starting to play with light and shadow now to get the dramatic effect I want. And here's of course, the flame element. Again, I photographed a fire and created this. The nice thing in Photoshop is you can pick and choose which pieces really look nice and kind of collage them together to create a nice shape. And that was what I came up with.
That's awesome.
Here I've layered in the fire element over the bush. And here's the silhouette I photographed of my brother in costume. The first set of pictures didn't go so well. They looked kind of awkward, the drapery and stuff. So I called him back to shoot again. And once we got a nice series of photographs that I liked, I went ahead and silhouetted him. Now I often shoot from green screen. I'll put up a green fabric drapery behind my models, and it expedites the process of creating a silhouette. It makes it so much faster.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Once I get the picture together, I tone it. I work totally in black and white at first, and I find that's a way of tweaking all the individual pieces so they play harmoniously together. And once that composite is done, then I'll put the sepia tone over the whole thing. And that's kind of inspired by one of my heroes, my childhood heroes, Rembrandt. I noticed that a lot of his paintings, he will layer like a brown tonal layer, and it kind of pulls everything together. It makes it look like it's part of one reality. So that's the sepia toning stage.
Interesting. So he would do that, I mean, even back then, analogous to what you're doing, but it would help him to think about what the colors are going to be, or what's actual.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, once you've got a warm ground down, and some of the Venetian masters did that as well. It's pretty easy to kind of lay color in and keep everything together, so there's a sense of harmony, much like in music.
Fascinating. Okay.
And here I've used digital airbrushes and other digital paint tools to bring in the color. And a lot of times I'm moved to take an expressionistic approach to color, a non-literal, just to bring up the drama, the emotion of a scene. And obviously, we don't typically see a red background and a purple sky, but I'm using color elements that the Levites were called to use in the creation of the tabernacle. Gold, purple, blue, scarlet. I like using those four colors again and again in my artwork. It's kind of a homage to, I guess, for lack of a better term, God's color palette. So,
so you're really trying to pull out those colors as inspired or as indicated by God, and to.
Yes.
Oh, that's really cool. Okay.
This is a picture from Exodus. Pharaoh's army, their chariots are being engulfed by the Red Sea collapsing upon them. And this was a really fun picture. I'm a big horse fan. I love horses. And when I get the chance to go out and attend horse shows in our area and photograph them, it's a real joy for me. I love animals, and horses in particular. they're like big dogs for me. So anyhow, I went to a show in a town in my area and photographed this breed. It's called an Andalusian. It's a Spanish Mediterranean. So it's a strict. I would assume Pharaoh probably used an early type of breed of Arabian horses, but this is what I had to work with. And so anyhow, this is the finished piece, and we'll break this down and how I put it together.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Let me get that going. There we go. Okay.
To start out, I like to sometimes ground everything with a physical, for lack of a better term, terrain, a topology. So I used the actual corral where they were practicing and training the horses in. So there's hoof prints, and I often work from grids as kind of an architectural reference point, so I can align different elements in a pleasing way. So I've got here in this slide, I've got the terrain in. We'll go to the next one.
Okay.
And for the water element, there's a waterfall up in my area, and I hiked up one day and I photographed it for about an hour. And when I looked at the pictures, they seemed too narrow. So I ended up having to paste, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different shots of the waterfall and to create this wall of water collapsing in over the horses.
Wow. Hold on, there we go.
And for the foaming elements, I used a number of clouds that I like shooting just a reference material. I like having like a pantry, for lack of better terms, of different nature effects, clouds, water elements, and stuff like that. So I was able to draw upon my cloud library and build up this foaming effect at the base of the water.
That's cool.
And here I'm blocking in the horse shapes. I just rough everything in and try and get a nice placement of elements before I clean everything up, remove the edges. And here for Pharaoh's chariots, I created in a 3D modeling program a chariot based upon an actual Egyptian chariot that's in a museum. I can't remember the name of the museum, but anyhow, I closely modeled it to the architectural model.
Okay.
And here I start to arrange the chariot, wheels popping off, chariots tumbling in space to get a kind of action dynamic effect.
That's cool.
The background chariots, wheels flying off. I think the text referenced wheels coming off. So I wanted to, do homage to that.
Wow.
And there's the horses, their edges all cleaned up. They look like they're part of one scene now. And next is to bring in the human elements, the chariots. And here's a silhouette of one of the Egyptian soldiers trying to repair a wheel. So again, I will photograph friends, family members, or professional models and remove the backgrounds so I can put them in. Props, they needed something else in that picture to convey military presence. So spears, arrows, all that sort of thing, start to put that in.
There it is. Wow, the sepia.
Yep, the sepia toning process to pull it all together. And then again, I start lightly putting in the colors and building up to a color crescendo, for lack of better expression, where the really strong colors get to sing and other colors are more subdued in the background. And
that's cool.
And that's the finished painting.
Wow. That's amazing. So I really appreciate you taking us through that, process. I mean, I think it's just really cool to see how people do stuff. I mean, artwork is one of those mysterious, magical things that I probably won't be doing anytime soon. So I appreciate that. But so kind of what is the philosophy of what you're doing? You've said you go through the Bible, you see a topic, and then you start thinking about it. Is there anything else that is really helping you to bring these out? Because I know that part of your philosophy is to help people to understand, how the Bible works. I think you want to make seen the unseen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I realized as a child when I was drawing and creating paper cutout models, I had a very vivid imagination. And as I got older and began my journey through the Bible, I realized it's kind of a gift. Not everybody has this. And I thought, when I reached the book of Ezekiel, that was it. There was something about chapter 1, Ezekiel, where the throne of God appears before him. And that was it. I began my journey and wanting to illustrate certain books of the Bible. So my philosophy is take this gift I have and, explore my own beliefs, dive in and try and bring forth the imagery that I experience in my imagination and share that with other believers or non-believers. And another thing I really wanted to do was, today's audiences are pretty sophisticated in their taste.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids, a lot of millennials, for example, they have these great expectations through social media. They want really clean, realistic imagery. They want something that speaks to them through their language. And it may not necessarily be an academic text or an article that they want to read. But if you can capture their attention with pictures, you might draw them in, inspire their imagination, and inspire them to dig into God's word for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. I just want to share one of my all-time favorites here, because it really does convey something that it's hard to put into words. As an author, I spend a lot of time trying to explain things and trying to understand and to articulate and help people understand what is really going on. This is absolutely just one of my absolute favorites that you've done. Here you have the Ancient of Days, or as he's described in the book of Ezekiel and also the book of Daniel. This is the book of Daniel, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes we tend to gloss over this stuff. We tend to say, well, okay, that's just anthropomorphic language, or it's just someone's vivid imagination. But then when you actually go and you put this into you put it into practice, you show us what it could actually look like. And I thought this was just brilliant. I mean, so I think you, in my opinion, you've captured that scene better than anybody else that I've ever seen it. And I really appreciate the fact that it's not a hand sketch, but it's, the way that you render these things really inspires me. It really says, oh, wow, here's somebody else that is actually getting what I'm seeing, right?
Yeah.
And he's portrayed it so beautifully in a way that helps us all to just understand that. So, again, so thank you. So one of the questions that Tonzi Norman has, he says, does Ted have any pictures of the tabernacle or like the inner workings of the temple?
I have some tabernacle pictures from Exodus where I depict the furnishings and a couple larger overviews of the tent itself and the courtyard, the hangings and the tapestry and so forth. But as far as the temple, I've got some views of Ezekiel's temple that I've done. And there's, I think, one interior scene of the wood incense altar. But I do at some point really want to do Isaiah chapter 6, the vision of Isaiah in the temple when he sees the throne of God and the seraphs above him, and his calling to ministry. I'd like to do that at some point. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Yes, your to-do list is big like the rest of ours, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I want to let everybody know that they can go again to your website, digitalartbytedlarson.net. And, there you can look at it. You can also get it if that is something that people are interested in doing. Of course, I highly recommend that they do that because it's just such great quality. But here are just a few of the samplings. I was able to get it to come up before, but for some reason I'm not able to enlarge it at this point. So I know how websites are. They're finicky sometimes. You're never quite done with your website, right?
No, there's always tweaks to be done.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, here we
There
go.
you go.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So yeah, there we go. For whatever reason, maybe it was my computer. But so I mean, oh my goodness, what an incredible picture.
The
Maybe
angst,
the
anguish of Pharaoh. I really wanted to convey this, just his almost blasphemous anger at God for destroying his firstborn, and yet coming to terms with he's been warned. It's like, but anyhow, yeah,
well,
I definitely wanted to make it a very dramatic, heartfelt scene.
And I like it that you didn't choose a really little boy. This is
kind of a teenager.
Yeah, teenager, 15, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is exactly the case. Well, of course, we don't know exactly, right? We don't know what age, but he could have just as well been 15 as any age, right? And so,
and there's this whole,
we don't know.
And there's this whole tradition of the eldest succeeding the father as a line of royalty, and so there's a lot of significance to the loss of a firstborn.
Yeah, well, wonderful. The pillar of cloud by day. That's a challenging one to do.
It was. I went to a biblical play, a passion play, and photographed, I can't remember, it must have been over 100 different people in costumes, and hand silhouetted each one of those and created this crowd following it was a lot of work, but the result is nice. It looks good.
Yeah. Well, it's really hard because there's not much in the desert. I've been to that desert and there's just not much there. So you did a good job there. Of course, the iconic crossing of the Red Sea, the pillar of cloud, presumably, well, I guess it was actually before and behind them. That's right.
Yeah. I think in the text, there's a reference to the pillar being between the army and the children of Israel as they're crossing through the Red Sea. So I chose to show it behind them. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Okay, we saw that one already, and we saw the how-to. So here's the camp at Elim. Yeah, the 70 palms.
That's right. That's cool. And the rock of Horeb. That's awesome, man. That's really nice.
Yeah, there's just a faint little trace of a figure in the waterfall there, and I kind of wanted to show that as the rock of Christ, sort of like the pre-incarnate Christ revealing himself through the splitting of the rock, and so there's this ghostly little human figure there.
Okay, right in there. Yeah, I can see him right in the midst of the water.
Yeah, that's not in the text, but I put that in there as a reference to another text in the New Testament.
Well, I would say that it's not there. Actually, God says, I will go and stand before you on the rock.
Yeah.
And so, we don't know if they could see him,
right.
But he was definitely located in front of that rock.
Yeah.
And, it's very significant. Of course, Paul even says that the rock followed them, which is really interesting. 1 Corinthians chapter 10.
Yep.
And so according to the Jewish tradition, they really believe that the rock followed them throughout the desert,
Right. Yeah.
And then when he says to then go and speak to the rock, he's talking about the same rock as before,
Yeah. Yes.
So, so again, fantastic. That really helps us to get a better perspective there. The camp at Mount Sinai.
Yes.
So these are really cool. I mean, these are just neat because they're not your typical animation or felt kind of felt drawing type stuff.
This picture was kind of inspired by a Flemish painter, Pieter Bruegel, and he shows these peasants kind of scurrying about doing their daily things, and I really wanted to convey the Israelites kind of kind of confused and kind of bewildered and kind of, a little nervous and fretting about, like, they weren't sure what was going to happen to them. There's this sense of unease. And so there's a lot of, interaction, a lot of hand gesturing, and either they're in praise or adoration to God, or they're freaking out. So
that's cool. The Ten Commandments. Oh, wow. You even use a Paleo Hebrew script. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Interesting fellow. I think his website's still up. Jack Kilman. He recreated a Semitic font that I use. And I kind of wanted to steer away from the typical curved tombstone shape that's
with the Roman numerals, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought about, just simple, hewn out tablets, 2 tablets, and so that's what I wanted to convey. And the gold, the red, the purple, I wanted to convey God's color palette, or at least the color palette is spoken to the Levites. So
yeah, well, you get an A+ for authenticity, because you even put the first set on this side and the second set on the other side.
Right.
Very much in line with Hebrew writing. So that's good.
Good.
I sometimes, you kind of cringe when you see the different versions of the Ten Commandments. You're like,
I'm sure you.
Close. Yeah.
I'm sure you scholar guys kind of this face palm thing every now and then.
Yeah, you're like, So thank you, but anyway. The blood of the covenant on the sacrificial, on the scroll of the law. Interesting.
Exactly. And in the background, I created the pillars blocking the way to the mountain, kind of the boundary for the children of Israel, and then the rough stone altar burning behind them with a sacrifice. So,
oh, that's cool. Yeah. Here we go. So someone was asking about the inside. So this is the inside of the Holy of Holies.
Yes.
Lots of gold in there.
A really interesting story for me around this picture. I can't remember which psalm David talks about the shadow of your wings as a place of refuge. But anyhow, when I did the lighting on this picture, the Shekinah glory emitting or radiating between the 2 cherubim, it projected these shadows on the wall of my model, and I thought, wow, that's kind of a cool idea. Maybe David, I don't know if David actually had access to the Holy of Holies, but maybe he heard through the priests that there were shadows. So it was a nice kind of full circle story for me in that, putting together that text and that potential reality.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Really, by creating the art, you may have answered, one of these nagging questions that scholars are trying to deal with. Like, well, how do we understand it literally?
Yeah.
And yet, so by the way, it's Psalm 17.
Oh, it's Psalm 17. Thank you.
Keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me under the shadow of your wings.
Yeah, that's it. And another kind of fun little thing I discovered when I did this tapestry, the veil between the holy place and the most holy place, I created these cherubim, and for some reason in this 3D model, they replicated as a infinite pattern against the gold wall and against the ark. And it's a stretch, but it looks a little bit like the Tetragrammaton. Like God's name repeated over and over and over again, sort of like, I don't know. It was just kind of a cool little reference for me. I wouldn't want to read anything into it and say, that's true. But for me in my journey, it was kind of neat to see that association.
But so, that's interesting. So again, tell us how you kind of got to the potentially the Tetragrammaton, because we don't know absolutely, right? This is a rendering.
No, it's a rendering, and certainly that Hebraic font wasn't in existence yet. So, but I thought the potential was interesting. The shape of the cherubim repeated over and over in the reflections of the different panels, and how it may have, through the folds of the curtain, through the drapery, may have jumbled these forms to look like text. So again, it's a stretch, but it's just something that occurred to me when I was making the picture.
That's really cool. That's pretty awesome. So, all right, the showbread table. That's a much nicer looking showbread table. How were you inspired to do it that way versus, I'm sure you've seen all the different kinds of stacking. You look at, you got, you have the offering, or what do you call it? The communion stacked things, like that's how you often see it. And
yes, I've seen those versions, and I didn't really, in the different translations I compared, I didn't see clear evidence of stacks, in other words, racks yet. I think that idea may have come a little later, but I know definitely the 12 pans for each of the loaves of bread was there. So I created just simple little, I went to a bakery as well and looked at how different baker trays would come in and out, and they're pretty practical. Sometimes they have handles on them, so I created little handles on the side, and the text did say there was a molding crown around the top, kind of, but I thought it, for simplicity's sake, carrying this thing around the desert, it can't be too elaborate, too detailed, not too ornamental.
Yeah.
So that was my version of it.
What is your take on the significance of the showbread? I mean, Jesus said he's the bread that came down from heaven, but I mean, everything that's in the tabernacle is a copy of what's in heaven.
Yes, I understand that. I also like to associate the temple or the tabernacle furniture as being aspects of Jesus, like the bread of life. So that for me, this is kind of like a symbolic foreshadowing of the bread of life.
Interesting. Wow, look at that. That is gorgeous.
And this is Aaron tending to the lampstand.
Mm-hmm.
This one I actually stood in as the model for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you look great.
I had a costume beard and made a real simple costume and elaborated it.
That's really cool. I mean, I had no idea that when you made these things, you actually had, real people in there.
Yeah.
Yourself being one of them. So, no, this one is really cool. Okay. Yeah. Because I wrote a book called Corrupting the Image.
Right. I saw that.
Yeah. And I talk about the biophotons. Biophotons are the phenomenon by which our DNA absorbs light and it re-emits light. Right. So when Moses was up there with God for 40 days and 40 nights and neither ate nor drank, and he was just in the very presence of God, that his DNA would have absorbed God's light, and God's light being more powerful than the sun, and at least 7 times more powerful than the sun, this is going to make a huge impact on Moses, and his face is going to literally shine.
Yeah.
And that is what's so powerful, is that, you've captured what I think, well, I'll just put it this way, put it bluntly, many theologians that I know are not this bold. Okay. Yep. They would say, well, that's just using anthropomorphic language, or just using, metaphors and all that stuff. Right.
Yes.
And, but the thing is, when you're an artist, you can't say, well, it's just a metaphor, right? You either have an image or you don't have an image, right?
Exactly.
And that's what I like about it. Yeah, you're forced to make a decision.
You are. You definitely have to. And for a lot of, I would say probably most of my pictures, I've had to make the decision, just try and go with what the text says. You're going to embellish and elaborate on it with your point of view and your understanding of scripture. That subjective element's going to happen. But if you try and just stick to what it says, great things are going to happen. Neat stuff's going to come out. So
I love that, because, that is just so powerful. And when I was writing my book, Corrupting the Image, I really felt that this is what the book was actually, what the text was actually saying. And, then it just so happened that now we've discovered this really cool feature called biophotons, where We know that our DNA absorbs light and it re-emits light. So if you ever get inspired, I think that Adam and Eve were also shining light. I think they
Oh,
had the same
wow.
phenomenon. Yeah,
Okay.
they had the same phenomenon, and Moses was just a very clear, easy example of that process. But I think that Adam and Eve before their fall would have essentially done the same thing.
Sure. No, it's
Yeah.
a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's your book of Ezekiel. I love this. I mean, this is so cool. Fire. There's so much fire in there. It's
Yes.
awesome.
Yes. I had a lot of fun shooting fire elements for this series. I went to a fire training center a couple of weekends and just photographed the firefighters doing their drills.
Mm.
And one scenario in particular was putting out jet airplane fires. And so they use these huge billowing plumes of I can't remember what the exact fuel they used was, but it was magnificent. So it was just wonderful. It was so easy. It was like 4th of July, photographing all these billowing flames and then putting together as backgrounds.
Huh. And of course, here you have the cherub, or also the seraph, if you look at
Yes.
the book of Isaiah. But I happen to think they're one and the same thing. But
Yeah.
we can argue theology later.
Sure.
So you had to make a decision here about what this creature looked like. How did you come up with this decision?
Well, I played around with the heads being facing 4 different directions, and like the 4 cardinal directions: northeast, southwest. And I don't know if that read so well as a 2-dimensional picture. I think if somebody were to make a film and zoom their camera around in a 360 motion, that might read very well. But I needed something to hitch it head on. And so I decided to have the lion and the ox's face kind of at a 3/4 angle, and everyone coming at you. There's an interesting passage where it almost describes the thing coming forward and back and forward and back to you. And so I just definitely wanted to just simplify it and create as much impact as possible.
That's really cool. And there is Ezekiel chapter 1, right? This is this is an amazing text. Again, when I was writing my book, I talk about Ezekiel chapter 1. It says that the one who was sitting on the throne had the form of Adam.
Yeah.
Right? And so he's not just some disembodied kind of spirit, right? God has a particular form. And again, now as the artist, you've captured that. I think you do a great job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely wanted to make him more human than supernatural. I know sometimes in scripture, like visions of the angels, they're kind of either metallic in their description or crystalline. But I definitely wanted to make, at least in the text, it describes him as looking like a man from the waist up. I definitely wanted to make him more human from head and shoulders. And then, of course, being surrounded by fire. And even though the blue is not readily apparent, I definitely tried to keep the throne bluish, like a sapphire.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I can appreciate the challenge of what you're doing here, because the text is everywhere. I mean, this is a really difficult text, right?
Yeah. It's very challenging.
It's all over the place. You've got these weird looking creatures. You've got all this fire. Incidentally, the word there that's used for amber in the Hebrew is the word hashmal, which means electricity.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I think it's really cool, because I think God is the ultimate power source. I think all energy comes from God. And I've been studying up on quantum physics and all kinds of stuff, and it turns out everything is just a bunch of energy. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Makes
Holy
sense.
Spirit energized the universe at the very beginning there with wave functions, right? Waveforms.
Yeah. Yes.
But the very word chashmal, electricity, that is what is radiating out from God, as well as the fire, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Ooh, that's nice. Opening the scroll. I'm going to just kind of keep on cruising, because we probably won't get through all of them, but just to give an idea here. Marking the saved. Interesting. Yeah. Powerful. Yeah, you know, because again, what you're doing is you're really helping us to see things in a different way. Now, this is a pretty bold picture you've got here, okay?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
these are obviously representing the two kingdoms, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom.
yeah. Represented by the
You
two
know,
sisters.
exactly.
Yeah,
And wow, that's powerful. Oh, this is one of the saddest parts of the Bible, where the
yeah. The
glory
glory
is
departs.
departing from the temple.
Yeah.
Well, you definitely know your Bible. I appreciate that.
Oh,
And
thanks.
you know, well, you can tell because you're doing things that are biblically correct, at least in my opinion. Okay.
I'm trying to. I'm really
Well, I
making an
know,
honest attempt at it.
I
Yeah,
know.
my limited understanding.
Well, you know, nobody has it all perfect, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you're at least doing a pretty good attempt here. But yeah, here in Ezekiel chapter 10, where after all that's been said and done, and God has had Ezekiel go and take a look, you know, dig through the wall. What do you see, son of man? Oh, I see them did all kinds of garbage. All right, and then he says the glory. It doesn't say the Shekhinah, but it says that the glory, the Kvod Adonai, departed
Mm.
from the temple. It went up to Mount Scopus, which is where years later the Romans would camp out and check out the city before they destroyed it. But
Mm.
he went up there, and it says it's kind of like he lingered up there for a bit, and
Mm.
it's like is nobody noticing? Nobody's realizing that the glory of God is leaving, and
Yeah,
it seems
yeah.
that nobody noticed and nobody cared. I mean, that's just sad.
One of the things I wanted to convey in this picture was the absence of humanity there. Nobody's there. Nobody's interested. Nobody's doing their job. The place is kind of vacant. It's like, all right, I'm leaving you guys. You're not.
Wow.
And it's a 3D architectural model I made of the temple. I actually used the proportions, the architectural proportions described in the text. So those sizes are as close as I could come to the what the text described.
Yeah, and you've got the pillars there in front. I mean, pretty awesome. There's Ezekiel looking through the wall.
Yeah.
Yep. Dry bones. Okay. Oh, mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Cool stuff. The throne of David. All right. Nice. And the seven gate of the outer court. This is the Ezekiel temple.
Yes. Yeah. Again, you have to make decisions about certain design features. For example, this really tall portico at the entrance. Some people will say that was there. Some people will say it wasn't. But you know, you have to make a decision and kind of commit and stick to it to flesh these things out.
No, I mean, yeah, and the Ezekiel temple is very challenging because we only have the text to go by. We don't have any other archaeological things to draw from. So the book of Daniel, the siege of Jerusalem. Ooh, interesting. Okay, cool stuff. Some of these I have not seen before, so these are new. The boys before King Nebuchadnezzar. Oh, that's awesome. That's really neat. Oh, that's cool. Okay, there's the statue. Oh man, the four in the furnace. That's awesome. How did you do that one? That's
well, cool. I built a 3D model of the furnace. I used looked at reference of different ovens of the day and throughout antiquity, and I decided to create it kind of dome-like. And of course, the text describes the vision of a fourth person being there with him, and one looking like a son of a god or son of the. You can probably illuminate that text much better than I can. So, I wanted to convey the boys or the young men. I think they were a little older at this point. You know, walking, doing their thing. They were alive, well, and protected. So,
wow, I really feel the power of that fire in this rendering, and yet the complete calm and serenity of these four guys. I mean, you know, it's all real. I mean, that's what just really pops out at me, right? This is again, you know, it's not the little felt drawings that you get when you're a kid. At least I did.
No, I definitely wanted to give it that movie realism as much as I could.
Yeah, and I think you were saying, for the Generation X or whatever generation
Yeah.
we're in nowadays,
Yeah.
the millennials, et cetera, way gone are the days of lousy art, right? And so I think this is really significant because what you're doing is you're helping people to see this is in real life. Okay, it's not just really bad artwork, and you're like, man, the Bible is so stupid, but
Right.
no, this is real. This actually happened, and it's now in movie quality kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So writing on the wall, Daniel the Lion's Den. Ooh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's actually
Um,
one lion that is in my local zoo. I photographed him for a few hours in different positions.
oh,
So, so
wow.
that's it shows 5 lions there, but it's actually one lion.
Oh, that's cool. I wouldn't have known. We looked at that one already. Vision of the Flying Goat. Oh, Prayer of Daniel. There's so much we can obviously go through.
Yeah.
Um, oh my goodness, the 4 great horns. Wow. What I like is you kind of shock me, because you're challenging me to see things for some of these in a way that I've never ever considered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but again, when you're an artist, you have to say, okay, what does this look like? Sometimes as a theologian, I can just read the text and I can argue about, this word or that word,
Sure.
and I don't have to describe it for you.
Yeah.
Though, I guess in my own defense, I actually wrote a book called The Millennium Chronicles, and there I actually wrote it as a novel, and I wanted to use the Bible just as, that would be the only thing, or primarily with a little bit of holy imagination there, but trying to describe what these things are going to look like in the last days, etc. And so, again, I can feel for what you did. I didn't have to actually draw it myself, but I tried to draw it with words.
Sure.
And yeah, it's definitely challenging. So, Wall of Fire, God's protecting, the woman in the basket. All right, that's cool. That's really awesome. Well, this is awesome. Again, everybody, just take a look at his artwork. This is fantastic stuff. How can people get this? They can order like a CD or a digital download, or how does that actually work?
Yeah. Right now, I can still do CDs for people, but I'm doing primarily digital downloads
Okay.
Since people have higher bandwidth rate and stuff like
Right.
that. So,
Yeah.
and if people misplace copies, they can just shoot me an email and I'll send them a link to download everything again. It's no big deal.
I might have to get that because I can't remember where I put my CD.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I don't, my new computer doesn't even have a CD player, so I'm kind of like
yeah,
out of luck here.
exactly. I know the technology is changing.
Yeah, it's just oh, that's awesome. The Great White Throne. This is a neat, look at that, approaching the gate. So this is how you would see those pearl gates.
Yeah. Now today I
What's your
would
philosophy?
probably do it a little bit different.
Okay.
I think the architecture, I'd probably embellish it a lot more. The red jasper wall, I'd probably give it a lot more detail, more
Okay.
ornamentation and stuff. But
Mhm.
yeah, at the time, I think I did this in 2000. Yeah, anyhow, it was the best I could do at the time. But it's still it's a fun picture to look at. And
Yeah. Well, it causes us to look in a different view, and this is the actual gate. So again, just seeing how massive that gate actually is,
yes,
in your understanding. Um, wow, very cool. And then the Tree of Life, the Alpha and the Omega. So fantastic. That's just really exciting stuff. And again, Ted, I want to thank you for coming on, for sharing with us what God has put on your heart, and then how you've been able to take those to render them into actual pictures and to help us see things in a little different way that we may never have thought about before.
mhm.
And I'm just looking at the chat room. People are really digging your work. I think it's really cool stuff.
Great.
Again, everyone, it's digital artwork by tedlarson.net. All right, so you can go ahead and take a look at those. And feel free to grab your own copy. That'd be pretty awesome. And he's definitely encouraged me. He's inspired me to look at things differently. I think you've even had a hand a little bit in just some of the research. You know, when I was doing my book Corrupting Image and others, I was looking for, okay, what do people think it looks like? So, you know, I want you to know that you're actually helping, you know, theologians, and you're acting as a theologian in your own right, because you're wrestling with the text.
Yeah.
You are having to understand the text. You're having to then, you know, make a decision about the text.
Yeah.
And then you are literally interpreting the text. I mean, that's what a theologian does, right?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
you're interpreting the text. So you're not interpreting it with words. You're doing what's actually harder, which is to interpret it with, you know, your actual digital paintbrush.
Right.
So,
yeah. But ironically, because of my active imagination, it's easier for me than using word descriptors. So, but thank you for what you do, because what you provide for so many of us is more detailed illumination than we might get through a cursory glance or a quick reading. So
my pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everyone, I want to encourage you to stay in the Word. The Bible is awesome when you really dig in, and then we have all these different, you know, tools now available. I mean, obviously we've got Ted's art, we've got all kinds of other stuff. We've got pictures galore of Israel. Google Earth is one of the coolest things you can check out. You know, that's a great way to just do a little flyover, you know, over Israel. So the tools are there if we want to take advantage of them, and to dig in. If you are interested, my books, The Millennium Chronicles, The Corrupting the Image, The First 6 Days, and of course, Discovering the Language of Jesus. Those are all available. Those are on my website if anyone wants to check those out. And hopefully that will inspire you to keep looking in the Word. And again, thank you to Ted. So everyone check out his site, digitalartbytedlarson.net, and there you can have that. So pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. And
thank you, Doug.
Yeah. Stay in the Word.